Hey guys, welcome to another episode of History with Lennox, and today we're looking at the second term of Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson was the third president of the United States, and he served from 1801 through 1808. Now, his first term was full of success stories, but it's the second term that's really going to do him in. I know this slide here is a little bit misleading because that's not Thomas Jefferson. Yeah, I know that. It's James Madison. Madison is the fourth president. He's going to inherit all of Jefferson's problems, so we're going to give him his due right here. Now, like I said, Jefferson's first term was a successful one. Going into his second term, he's right in the midst of the Lewis and Clark expedition, which stemmed from the purchase of Louisiana from France, the greatest real estate deal in all of history. When he purchased Louisiana, he is going to commission Lewis and Clark to go explore this territory and try to find a northwest passage, a waterway from the Mississippi River to the Pacific Ocean. Now, Lewis and Clark are going to go out and explore, like I said, the entire region. And not only that, other explorers who went with them are going to kind of branch out and explore different areas. Now, all sorts of new information and knowledge is going to filter back to Jefferson in Washington, D.C., and that's going to spur this desire for more westward expansion. As you remember, Sacagawea is going to be the guide that takes Lewis and Clark through the Louisiana Territory all the way to the Pacific. Sacagawea was a member of the Shoshone tribe, originally from the area right between Idaho and Wyoming. But she is going to guide these men all the way to the Pacific Ocean, along with her husband and infant son. This expedition, the purchase of Louisiana, is going to vault Jefferson to a huge victory in 1804. If you think back to the election of 1800, it wasn't this easy. Remember, he had gone against Aaron Burr. They had basically tied in the Electoral College, which is going to lead to a vote in the House of Representatives. It took 36 votes for Jefferson to be elected president. Not the case in 1804. Because of the success of his first term, look at it. 162 electoral votes, 92% of the vote went to Thomas Jefferson. Now, Aaron Burr, he had served as Jefferson's vice president, but going into the second term, Jefferson kind of threw him aside. Remember, we have the 12th Amendment now, so the vice president runs on a separate ticket. Burr is going to retreat back to New York, where he is going to ally himself with radical Federalists. That means he changed parties again from the Democratic Republicans to the Federalist Party. And these radical Federalists are looking to secede from New England. Now, of all people, Alexander Hamilton is going to basically put a spotlight and expose Burr and these Federalists with their plot. So they're not going to be able to carry it out. But that's just one more kind of stab in the back as far as Aaron Burr was concerned with regards to Alexander Hamilton. What's even more fascinating about Burr is once this Federalist plot is exposed, he's actually going to go to Spain, Spanish America, and try to get part of Mexico from Spain in order to unite it with the Louisiana Territory, that big piece of land that Jefferson just bought, and put that entire territory under his rule. So basically, working with officials and trying to steal land from the United States, Burr's trying to create his own empire. He's actually going to be tried for treason and acquitted. Now, right between Burr's attempt with radical Federalists to get the New England Territory to secede and his plot to take over the Louisiana Territory and build his own empire, Aaron Burr is going to attempt to exorcise the demons that he believes exist between him and Alexander Hamilton. This is going to lead us to the famous duel in Weehawken, New Jersey, where Aaron Burr kills Alexander Hamilton. Now, we already talked about how Hamilton's political career was kind of upset by his affair with Maria Reynolds in a previous video. But there's always the possibility that he could have risen back to the top in the political world. But we'll never know, thanks to Aaron Duel. It's become the most famous duel in American history. Meanwhile, Jefferson has his own demons to exercise, if you will, in the form of the Barbary pirates. A lot of people don't realize that we were actually at war with Tripoli in the early 1800s. Now, Tripoli is part of the Barbary coast of North Africa, and it borders countries such as Morocco, Algiers, and Tunis. And these 4 countries made up what we called the Barbary States. And within the Barbary States, we had pirates. Pirates who controlled trade in the Mediterranean. And for years, European countries had paid tribute to these pirates to allow their ships to pass without being attacked. The United States did as well. Both George Washington and John Adams paid that same tribute. But under the presidency of Jefferson, the Barbary pirates tried to raise their tribute, basically raise their rate. And we were not about to pay any extra. So what happens? The Tripoli pirates declare war against the United States. And for 4 years, our American ships were fighting the Barbary pirates over in the Mediterranean. Now, we do restore some peace in 1805, the first year of Jefferson's second term, but we still kept fighting them. We had a peace, but apparently not everybody got the word. And we're going to continue having battles with the Barbary pirates until about 1815, when Commodore Decatur is going to actually negotiate a peace that will be permanent. So this was the first foreign policy challenge that Jefferson is going to face, but it's not the biggest one. The biggest one is what's going on with the Napoleonic Wars over in Europe. Now, pause for a minute and think back. If you remember correctly, under the Washington administration, the French Revolution got started. And Jefferson was very supportive of the United States getting involved and supporting the French. As that war expanded to be France against the monarchies of Europe, again, Jefferson thought we should support the French. Once Napoleon comes in, once Jefferson has control of the reins of our country, involvement is really not his priority. I mean, he's dealing with the Barbary pirates. He doesn't want to have to deal with Napoleon and a European war. When you look at the Napoleonic Wars, basically it's broken down in a land versus naval battle. The French, under Napoleon, are trying to implement what's known as a continental system, taking control of the entire continent of Europe. England, at the same time, is trying to prevent that using their naval power, and they put a blockade around as much of Europe as they possibly can. Now, this blockade is going to have a direct effect on the United States. Even though we don't want to be directly involved in the war, we still want to trade with all of these European powers. And this blockade is preventing us from doing that. To add insult to injury, our economy is dependent on that. The economy that Jefferson has created. Remember, he wanted an agrarian-based society. Basically, what he wanted to do was maintain that system of mercantilism that we had when we were colonies, where we sent our raw materials over to Europe and they would send their finished goods over here. He didn't want to see an increase in American industry at all. He wanted to increase our agricultural base. But this blockade over in Europe is making that very difficult. Let's make it even worse. Neutral rights. What does that mean? Neutral rights basically says that if a country is not involved directly in a war, basically declaring their neutrality, that those should be respected by the warring countries, meaning neutral countries should be able to come and go as they please. To make it even worse, our sailors are being impressed. And what does that mean, you might ask? To impress a sailor means you are forcing them into service in your military. So what was happening is British ships were stopping our merchant fleet, our trade vessels, and claiming that the sailors on those ships had deserted the British Navy, and they were going to take them into custody and press them back into service of the British Navy. Now, we didn't have records like we have today, so it was very easy when this big English warship stops this little trade vessel as these English officers board the trade vessel and say, hey, those three over there are deserters, and we need them back in the British military. An unarmed trade vessel is not going to argue. So you're going to see thousands of American sailors pressed into service into the British Navy. It's kind of like, where did everybody go? Now, the European countries started to set up their own policies. Now, even though we're still neutral, they are setting policies that again affect us. What England is trying to do is stop ships, any ship, American, whatever, from getting to Europe and supplying Napoleon with supplies. So the Essex decision is going to be made in 1805 by Great Britain. And what this says is we are going to return, meaning we, England, to a policy of stopping all indirect shipments. Originally, England would say we're going to stop all ships with a French flag. I mean, that makes sense. That's who they're at war with. But what started happening, you saw ships from the French West Indies traveling to the United States, moving their cargo to a U.S. ship, and then that ship goes to France. That's how France was getting supplies to be brought in, under a neutral flag. So what the Essex decision said was we're just going to stop every ship, regardless of the flag that's being flown on it. And when we board that ship, if we find deserters from the English Navy, we're going to impress them back into service. Now keep in mind, most, if not all, of these sailors on American ships, they're not deserters. They're Americans, but how do you prove that? And then they issued the Orders in Council, 1806. So this is another year later. They have the Essex decision, now the Orders in Council. And with the Orders in Council, England is forbidding all neutral trade with France and her allies. England, with the Essex decision, said we're going to stop every ship. With the Orders in Council, they're going to no, we're just going to forbid every ship from trading with France. France is going to jump in on this as well. In 1806, they're going to issue the Berlin Decree. And the Berlin Decree said that, fine, we're going to stop all ships trading with England. So where does that leave us? Where does that leave America? Basically, right in the middle. Now, Jefferson could have very easily declared war. Could have been done. But remember, coming into his first term, debt was already a problem in our country. Then he spent all that money on Louisiana. Good thing, but an expensive decision. So he decides he wants to use what's known as peaceable coercion. We're going to try to coerce or convince these other countries that they can't afford to stop trading with us. So in 1806, right about the time that Berlin Pact was made by France, Congress is going to pass the Non-Intercourse Act, which forbade certain British goods from being imported into the United States. Basically, what we said was, you know what? You're going to stop our ships. We're not going to trade with you. The idea behind it, Jefferson thought, was the economic loss was going to be monumental for England. Kind of similar to what we saw during the Age of Protest in the 1760s with all our boycotts and stuff like that. That's what we tried at first, but things started to heat up after that. The Chesapeake Leopard affair is going to be what really puts us on the path to war. Wait, you didn't know there's going to be another war with England? It's coming. The Chesapeake Leopard affair is going to be an interaction between the USS Chesapeake, an American ship, and the HMS Leopard, a British ship. And what's going to happen is the HMS Leopard is going to try to stop the Chesapeake. Shots are going to be fired. Basically, a battle is going to be fought, and it's going to result in 21 U.S. casualties, the loss of American life because of a British attack. This is when Jefferson says enough, and he is going to pass the Embargo Act of 1807. This is the ultimate in peaceable coercion, except peace has gone out the window. The Embargo Act of 1807 basically said we're going to use economic coercion to get these warring nations to respect our neutral rights. We're trying to avoid war. We're trying to get Great Britain to stop impressing our sailors. And the result is an absolute failure. Because what is an embargo? Simply put, an embargo is a complete shutdown of all trade. What Jefferson basically said is, until you respect our neutral rights, we will not trade with anybody. I want you to let that sink in for just a minute. We will not trade with anybody. What was Jefferson's economic basis for how he was going to run the country? It was based on trade, getting our raw materials to Europe and their finished goods here. And he has just shut all of this down. This is a huge failure for the United States. And New England is especially upset about it. New England relies on trade. That's our merchant class up there. And he has just taken away all of their economic foundation. They have nothing now that they can build their economy on. I don't care what U.S. history course you take in your lifetime. When you get to Jefferson's second term and you talk about the Embargo Act, you will always see this cartoon. Oh, grab me. This is depicting the New England merchants trying to trade with Great Britain, regardless of the Embargo Act. Take a look. In the bottom right-hand corner, you have a ship that's from Great Britain. You can tell by the flag. And just below that, you can see a rowboat being loaded and another one out in the water. The main characters of the cartoon is a merchant trying to carry a barrel of some type of good to the rowboats going out to the British ship. Yet he's being held back by a snapping turtle, which represents the Embargo Act, who is standing on his license to trade. And what the man is saying is, oh, this cursed, oh, grab me, meaning this doggone embargo. And the other guy saying how it nicks him, how it's preventing him from trading. This is what the New England merchants felt, that they were being held back by this embargo. And that's what this cartoon is all about. And how do I know this, that it's about the embargo? Look at the word, oh, grab me, and flip it. It's embargo spelled backwards. Well, with all of this going on, the election of 1808, you're going to see the resurgence of the Federalist Party in New England. This is New England voting against Jefferson and his economic policies. Unfortunately for them, it's not enough because Jefferson's Secretary of State, James Madison, will win the presidency, but he is going to end up inheriting all the problems that Jefferson created with this Embargo Act. And that's what we'll talk about in our next video on the presidency of James Madison and the War of 1812. Appreciate you listening. Hope you have a great day. And if you missed anything, man, you can always rewind and go back. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.